I'm here today to talk about some patterns or some tasks that you might be able to use and take back to your company's enterprise or otherwise, and kind of maybe work more collaboratively with restrictions of a typical company hierarchy, I guess. So my name is Brent Beer. You can reach me practically everywhere on the internet at that handle, which isn't standing for burnt beer. It stands for Brent Beer. I just took one letter out of my first name, much to the confusion of every community ever. Defunct of GitHub, one of the founders at GitHub actually once, when he first met me, he shook my hand and he goes, "So explain to me, how do you burn beer?" And I said, "You don't, I don't think, I don't know, I'm not a brewmaster, but also it's my first name, just slightly misspelled, because I fudge my fingers all the time, so it happens." So just a little bit of background. I guess this is kind of easy to say that we think using GitHub and specifically GitHub Flow is kind of the best way to collaborate. Now, a lot of people say, "Oh, what is GitHub Flow? I've heard of Git Flow. It's that whole crazy branching model with Git, and I don't understand version control, so how does that work?" But basically, it's a few things. It's all about shipping things fast and often, being as open as possible with the things you're working on, and just basically using GitHub to collaborate, right? And we kind of push the limits on GitHub every day. We hear from customers, and as I go to conferences and workshops and user groups, I hear people say, "I don't want to bug you, but I have a feature request." And 9 times out of 10, when they're complaining about something at scale, maybe they have a huge organization or they're on enterprise, my answer is almost always, "We know, we experience that too. Here's what you should do to get around it," or "We're working on that. We want to make sure it's really good before it ships, and then you'll have it too." So, we kind of experience kind of the hardest things to work on. So kind of vision, right? What is this talk going to be about? I've given many talks about GitHub now, and before that I kind of, not religiously and not like a stalker, but I would keep up with talks that GitHubbers would give. Zach Holman being one of them, defunct, and Majumbo, the two of the founders before that, and it's kind of a wonder that they didn't ask me to stop following them. But for this talk, I want to kind of give these patterns to people about how you can take basically GitHub Flow back to your office. So, one thing that we like is to allow our developers to go do what they do best. This means also be as distributed as possible, but within that distribution across the world, we like you to feel free to do things your own way. So a lot of companies have this 70-20-10 rule, and I don't know all the fine-tuned details of it, but when I first heard about it, it was from Google, where that 10%, they basically say, go do whatever it is you want to do. So go explore some project, go work on Python instead of Java, or start playing around with Ruby on Rails or Node and Go and find out why they don't scale, whatever it is you want to do. I guess we kind of take that to the extreme, though, because we allow people to not just spend 10% of their time, but as much of their time as they want to on something, kind of within reason, right? There's that little asterisk next to the book of reading the GitHub guide, I guess, that says, don't be an idiot about it and suddenly decide, yeah, awesome, I'm going to get hired to do support, and then on my second week, I'm going to immediately start trying to ship code on .com. That doesn't work, right? We have checks and balances, I guess. We keep our coworkers in check. So if I hired someone on my team, I'm excited about them. I was probably involved in the hiring process. So as soon as they join my team, I don't want them to immediately leave my team, right? So, but if they're on my team and I see them exploring this new stuff, and they're doing a really good job at it, and it's really interesting, and it has value to the company, then we allow them to continue to explore that, and we keep communication open about what they're doing, why they're doing it, and how it's going to benefit everyone. So a few of the things that we do, kind of as I just mentioned, when they're going to do these things, or anytime you're working on any project ever, we try to over-communicate. This means we have chat, we have email kind of through pull requests and issues. We talk to people in person. We started doing Google Hangouts. Once a week, we have what we call Beer 30, which is basically Tom or one of the founders either talking about some topic that they want to talk about that week, or we'll interview someone internally, the head of some team, saying, tell us about your project that you're working on that you're getting ready to ship next year and why we should all be excited about it. And so it kind of makes us all feel like we're super connected. We have an internal tool on Android, iPhone, and the web that is essentially like Yammer or Facebook that allows us to all post about what we're doing, what we're working on, things that we've shipped this week. So at any given time, I'm basically always feeling connected. So over-communicate. And allow people to find and explore interesting things, and make it easy for things to be found. So some of the tools that we built within github.com for searching, those are specifically around our own problems that we've had. When we as an organization have upwards of 700 repositories, those get kind of hard to find and manage and understand what is happening and who's working on what. So we need to be able to explore those things. And with all these projects that we have, we want to keep the barrier of entry really low. So just yesterday, actually, two of my coworkers, Muan and Jessica, were working on our community app, so kind of the thing that we do around sponsorships. And they ran into a problem. It's currently deployed on Heroku, but through Ruby and the Ruby Gems community, there's many versions of a gem that you might need to do certain actions. The Heroku gem, or Heroku toolbelt for that matter, is kind of one of those things. So they pinged me early in the morning, because we're only a few people in London right now, and said, this isn't working for me. I wanted to work on this app and be able to fix some features of it on the front end, but I followed all the instructions of the README, and it's not working. Turns out the version of the Ruby gem they had was wrong from what the app was wanting. So barrier of entry, they ended up not working for the rest of the day on that, or they spent too much time kind of figuring out how to get things going. So we do lots of things with talking, right? Like all those, maybe not the megaphone. I don't yell at anyone in the office, but you kind of get the idea. One of the main ways we do this is through issues. So you might think pull requests, but actually issues kind of are the base for what we do most of our stuff in, pull requests being the ones around code. So we like to keep them really simple, and you can see this in the design as much as possible. There's practically nothing to the form, and I think if Kyle Neath, kind of the guy who's leading our vision on design, if he had his way, he'd pretty much kill the entire web interface except for this form here. He's a really minimal guy, love him. So they can be anything though, right? They don't have to be about code. People always say, well, we don't use issues because Jira. And it's like, okay, well, you go pay for Jira. We're going to have this thing that ships with .com, and we're going to use that. That being said, Jira sometimes does work better. We know that. That's fine. Whatever works best for you, you should use that. But there's lots of things you can actually use issues for. They don't have to be about bugs. They don't really even have to be about feature requests. They can be to-do list items that you want to do around the office. Maybe the repo that you have the issue on isn't even code. Maybe it's some standards onboarding repository, and you want to have a conversation about someone saying, hey, by the way, it's my second week, and I just wanted to give some feedback on what the hiring process was like. Here's the issue, right? And then the conversation happens, and you go from there. So reported bugs, as I said. We've got Jerry here saying that there was an issue with some code base. Then we have Heather, our person of headr, kind of saying, I don't know how this code works. I'm non-technical. I'm not a developer, not a programmer. But there's this bug on this thing. So hey, I'm giving you feedback. So that's cool. But we also use it for a to-do list. This is a picture of a sponsorships repo that we use within GitHub that our two people from our community team use. So as a new request comes in for us sponsoring someone, we have a given set of checklists that we fill out for this. Furthermore, we actually attach it to a milestone. Maybe that milestone is settled by the end of the week, end of the month, whatever, end of the quarter, depending on how their budget is. They have these things that they like to settle. So zero code in this repository. It's essentially just issues. And then issues also reference other issues. And I don't know if anyone here is a big GitHub power user, but we often will reference issues between repositories from one issue to another, reference them from commits even. It really just helps make the web of GitHub stuff incredibly tight. So along with the issues and the commits referencing those issues, we also do things for code review, right? So we use pull requests. I guess there's no shock there. and we use pull requests to do the code review. So sometimes we get asked about projects. I think Facebook has one called Fabricator or something. Excuse me if I'm getting that wrong. But they use it for code review that essentially code can't be merged into kind of their master branch unless two people say thumbs up. But the feature itself doesn't allow them to do the merge. It's not a human factor that is involved there. You actually have to get two people to essentially sign off on something to merge something in. We can do that with pull requests. It's just we allow each other to kind of have the say on that. So similar to issues, right? Pull requests are centered around code, strategy, and feature discussions about some actual thing that is going to be deployed. So you can review the diffs, reference issues from pull requests. Maybe you had that non-technical person file an issue, and then as you go to work on your pull request, you could say, hey, this references issued 496, and then you have that cross-linking that I mentioned a moment ago that actually goes into there. And you can write discussions, or comments rather. So kind of like the issue, it's a very simple pull request screen. It's essentially the header, some people involved, some commits that came in, etc. So if I had to dumb it down, it's basically this, right? There's a title, a major description, a bunch of commits that got shipped for it, people chatting about it, more commits, things evolve, etc. We have actually a repo that we're looking, or a pull request that we're looking to show as a GitHub Hall of Fame. That is how one of our designers built our bronze statue in our first floor of our new office. It went for about 6 months, and it's filled with just images and the changing of the statue and the clay sculptures that so it's not really code. So where it says commit, it's just image of me updating this clay statue. But it went on for 6 months. This is something that didn't really close down for a long time, but eventually the thing shipped. So we have a few things that are actually showing up on the top of this pull request that are kind of important to notice. I think most important to me is that current status. Is it closed, merged, or open? And then kind of where are these things coming from? And then we have 3 tabs. You can see the files change. That's the one I mostly use. The number of commits that might be there. You could see the references there, and you're able to move between these. So show of hands, just to stretch our arms out maybe a little bit. How many people love meetings? Good, great, cool. One thing that's great about pull requests and issues and a lot of the things that we do on GitHub is that there's no meetings about them because they often happen in a URL. So if anyone was just in the keynote, one of the things that the speaker said was every conference-driven development, every time he does a conference talk, he likes to have open source projects that he has. Furthermore, he gives out the URL so that everyone can go home with something, right? So you have these URLs that exist for all time because we also want these to exist for all time. As someone is new, onboarded into a project, if they want to go look at, wait a minute, before I was hired, I really hated that feature, and then I ended up loving it. How did that discussion evolve? How did that feature evolve? You can go look at these URLs of these pull requests and issues and conversations that happen around them because those exist kind of for all time. And so also through all these pull requests and issues, there is some sort of notification that's sent out. So I don't love emails. In fact, I've just recently kind of changed my whole perspective on emails within GitHub because I am subscribed to too many repos within github.com, too many things that I don't necessarily care about. And GitHub, if you let it, will email you about everything. You can go into your settings and say, OK, only email me if I'm @mentioned, and send me web notifications otherwise. So that's kind of changed my life for the better. So those @mentions are specifically just like Twitter, right? So as someone is on a project, we had this new person joining for outreach towards science. So people working on science papers and research. Now that he's on he's in the company, I can go to a bunch of repos and CC him to resubscribe him to those things, and he'll get an email or a web notification kind of bringing him into the conversation. So look at my pull request. Hey, Arvon, you're the expert on this because you understand science and I don't. Or, hey, this is a broken issue, or this bug is broken, or this feature is broken because of this bug. Hey, so-and-so, can you take a look at this? And then lastly, you can actually mention entire teams. So if you're the owner of a repository, you can say, wait a minute, this is the entire enterprise web team. I need them to look at this project, but we have a QA team that needs to make sure they run through this feature before you merge it in for the latest release. OK, cool. Hit the entire QA team, run through that, and then we can go from there. And lastly, for fun, right, because we can have fun with this, we use emojis like you wouldn't believe. We've even integrated this into all of our external apps as well, because the emoji library is actually open source on GitHub. So it's just more fun to kind of talk to your colleagues like they're friends instead of people you only see once a day or something like that. So don't make it hard, talk it out. You have to over-communicate with a lot of stuff, especially when you're on the web, because text is hard to understand tone. So that's why things like emojis and mentioning people everywhere is really important. You have to really get a feel for your colleagues. Often when you only see them once a year, you have to be pretty explicit and hold lots of conversations with them, lots of places. Secondly, you need to explore these things, right? So kind of search on GitHub has taken a change for the last couple, I'd say, year or two. We've started using Elasticsearch a lot more. We have guys we hired one more dedicated search guy. We have people who are working on the back end about things a lot better, or indexing. We've done trainings with Elasticsearch. So I love Elasticsearch. It's actually made all of our lives and your lives much easier. So we used to have 2 search boxes on GitHub. You'd go over to your issues and pull request tab, and there'd be a search box there. But then there would still be a search box up top. We've taken these things, or we've merged those 2 together, not to use Git terminology. We've merged those 2 things together, and now it's a context-sensitive search box at the top of your screen. So we kind of have the real big microscopes, so to speak, about finding things on GitHub. So if you just go to github.com/search, or I think /launchbar even, you have essentially a search box that's like this. And you're essentially searching all of GitHub. And if this was within an enterprise instance, you're searching your entire enterprise instance. It's kind of no difference there, right? So you can find things. You can say, I'm looking for this Android project that I know we have to use. OK, cool. I found that. And now kind of within that Android project, if you use the search bar at the top of the page, you can look for something specific. And you can see, there's a bunch of code, and there's a bunch of issues here. So it does the full text search over the issues. And we're able to better find these projects that we might be interested on, or some bug with our Android phone, Android app, whatever it happens to be, that this code is about. And we can dive into those things and make it as easy as possible to find. So kind of that's as the preface to this, right? So once you have search, doing advanced search, kind of changing the fields that you can find, actually using that same syntax for other things, extensions, you can find specific files. Once you find all these things, it's really about, OK, cool, I found that. I made that easy. Now I can actually go work on that thing. Or I'm looking around for projects to work on, kind of like a help wanted page. So I think this is something most companies should do, internally, externally, whatever it is. You should create help wanted repositories as a place for maybe you just got onboarded. You were hired for a general purpose. You don't necessarily know which repository or project you should work on, but there's people who are kind of giving shout outs or help wanted to their favorite project. So here's our help wanted. We have some design work that needs to get done, T-shirts that we want to get through the shop. Maybe we need someone to design up a T-shirt. Explore Next, kind of there at the bottom for a long time. My colleague, John Rohan, was the only one working on the changes to the Explore features. So trending, stars, the mobile views that just shipped yesterday. It's essentially all him. And so he was trying to entice other GitHubbers to shift from what they were working on, maybe github.com or some internal project, to work with him on this. And so kind of because the URLs are there, he's able to talk about things, kind of see the correlation there. And then people can find these things and start working on those projects. And kind of as I said with that Explore Next stuff, this is a shot of our enterprise instance, actually, that we run ourselves. So the trending search within your own organization, you can see new projects that maybe if your company was 12,000 developers, or you had a 12,000, 1,200 seat enterprise instance, as a new project starts, a lot of people are going to get maybe an email notification about it. They might decide to help contribute. It basically becomes your own mini community. And so your trending and your trending developers actually all work the same way on enterprise that they would on .com. And you can find cool things to work within your own instance. The two differences there, GitHub on .com, or .com, the .com team as we call it, is everything that we're hosting for you. Everything's on our servers, etc. The private public things is just, can someone browse your repository without access? Yes, if it's public. Private, it's around your organization or your specific collaborators that you've added. Enterprise is a whole nother level of security where you've said for one reason or another, maybe you're a banking institution or you're overseas and your investors are a little nervous about things being on Amazon's own servers, whatever. You want everything you own, your data, etc., to be on your own servers, your own hardware. That's where enterprise comes in, and you install it, and it runs, and it's basically the exact same thing we run. Yes. Enterprise will lag behind on .com a little bit, and that's why it's important to always update your instance. But that's just because we have to port certain things over, and then as we start working on enterprise-specific features as well, it takes a little bit longer to add those in. So 2 levels of security there, I suppose. So Render is one of those projects that people were able to explore and find out and take their own time to work on. So if anyone has seen any of the beautiful 3D rendering that has actually happened on GitHub in the past year, that's basically as a result of people saying, what'd be really cool is if our 3D printer could be accessible via chat. Cool, all right, now I can print things from where I'm sitting, that's great. How do I look at what it's gonna look like before I print it, right? There's all these sites out there you can download the STL files from, and it said, this will be a sandwich, or this is a deer's head that you can mount on your wall and it'll look funny, or this is the USS Enterprise, or etc. You can go and download these things and print them at your printer, but you might not exactly know how they're gonna look. So we had a few people kind of work on building this out. One was an enterprise web developer, so he kind of built our admin interface to managing all of our enterprise customers. The other was a hardcore back-end systems guy who also just loved 3D printing. It's a weird connection there of 2 disparities. And they got together and they built Render. And then we realized how much press was around this, how many people or customers actually loved this feature. And so no one really held them back. As soon as they started building this stuff, we were like, that's awesome. I love this. Everyone else loves this. Continue to do that stuff. Oh, hey, can you help us fill your old shoes? Right? So there's that last connection of you're doing this thing that's awesome, but you still have an obligation to your team. So they filled those shoes. Similarly, we have Sean Bryant, who is able to help out with them from time to time, but he didn't really want to full-time go work with render stuff. Now, he's kind of the product QA-ish person with enterprise who can, every once in a while, switch over to render and help them out, help them do things. One of his most recent contributions that he was around for was the 3D diffs that we have on GitHub now. So as people are working on these models, they can make revisions to them, send those in, and then actually say, I'm going to take your little, I don't know what this is, ARM thing, and change it around. Or for instance, if we had the OctoCAD on the other page and I actually wanted to make it the head square, I could do that as well. There's 2 types of diffing that actually go on here. There's the revision slider and the highlighter. So you can kind of change the way you're actually viewing this diff as well. And Sean joining the team was kind of a push for that. Now Sean is able to step over there, find the project, work on it, talk to his team, let them know, hey, I'm going to be working on render this week. Sorry, I can't really ship this feature. So-and-so can help out with you from there. And then he comes back the next week, right? So he's able to float around, but maintain some anchor point of what he's working on. Similarly, we have Ben Balter, who is actually just in town for MozFest and some open data and open government things here. He's our government bureau cat. So as in, yes, we code, or George Washington cat, I guess. And Ben is our government liaison. So he basically does what I do, talking to people, teaching Git and GitHub, but he does that to government people who have more red string than you can knit a sweater with. So Ben helps people who are technical or non-technical understand how GitHub works and how they can increase their workflows within the government. Similarly, though, Ben, being in Washington, D.C. most of his time, ran into these guys at a company called Mapbox. Has anyone heard of Mapbox? It's like Google Maps, but it's a lot prettier. So talking to Mapbox, he was able to say, you know, I wish your maps could be on github.com. I wish we had some way to render your maps on github.com. So Ben was able to kind of, as a bureaucrat would do best, kind of connect the two for beautiful graphs or beautiful maps like this one. So he was able to work with them around their format, their standard of GeoJSON files to specify these points on a map, use some JavaScript that kind of connects to their server, pulls back to us through render, and places those on the map. So if I wanted to have points of a location inside of San Francisco when you're in town visiting, hey, mom and dad, go to this URL, view this map, click things, it'll be amazing, I could do that within GitHub. Or if I was a new GitHubber and I wanted to see where my other GitHubber friends liked to go drink, have coffee, have breakfast in different cities around the world, I could do that with GeoJSON as well, all through GitHub. So we have kind of paths to get somewhere. Maybe this is a running path or a tour that you want to see. You could also have fire hydrant locations or bike locations, zip car availability, Wi-Fi access points. Ben actually has most of the coffee shops in Washington, D.C. mapped for ones that have Wi-Fi and ones that don't, which I think is pretty neat. And then last, you can get kind of county breakdowns of different places within a city. So you can overlay things on top of the map and say, well, technically I fall under this location, and okay, so what's my county? Who am I voting for this election, etc. And it just is a matter of you going to create this GeoJSON file for that city. And also a lot of cities now, with our kind of push to government and Ben's work in general, and government.github.com, we see these cities saying, oh, me, I want more open data on GitHub. So then they do things like this to allow their users to kind of see these things. And we could furthermore render those off-site onto their own things. Maybe they want to do a blog post about this. They could have a nice little picture of, or not picture, but actual iframe back to GitHub saying, you know, rendered by GitHub. So all those projects were able to be found, searched on, communicated around, and then were enriched as a company even more by doing this. So we have people like Ben and Sean specifically who are able to work on these projects, but they don't have to leave their original homes. They're not completely checking out of their hotel. They're just going out for a stroll or seeing a friend, if you need a terrible analogy. Otherwise, if it's someone like Slava or Mike who originally built Render, they completely left their teams, but they were able to over-communicate about slowly moving and saying, hey, it's OK, I'm not jumping ship. I'm not stranding the team or abandoning the team. Let's fill these roles. So lastly, kind of the last pattern, this is probably the biggest one to me. Make getting started on projects as easy as possible. Whatever it has to be, make people able to work with you. Dead simple. I'm not a full-time developer at GitHub at all. And before this, I did Ruby on Rails, I explored with Python, I did some JavaScript, some bash scripting, all these things, but I'm not an amazing programmer. But within a lot of our projects that we have, there's a lot of small things that I'll see wrong. Documentation broken, missing a contributing.md file, not having a license file, maybe some simple UI fix that I know how to tweak some CSS on, JavaScript's not working, not loading, wrong version of this gem file, that gem file. Those are small things that I can contribute to that a core maintainer would otherwise say, I don't want to switch gears and go work on this small thing. It's working for me. Screw you, man. I'm just going to keep working on this awesome new feature. But then people aren't welcomed into his community of working on this project. Kind of similarly within in enterprise, if your people are able to move around and explore new things, well, they're not going to want to explore your thing and help you out on your team because they can't get started, right? And then you don't want to take 100% of your time to reinstall all their apps and everything to get them running. You just want them to be able to work right away. Kind of the most important thing is the README. This is, as I tell people through teaching Git and GitHub, this is a welcome mat. We show this as the first thing rendered on the repository page. You have your code, kind of your file structure, and then your README is right there. And the reason we do that is because kind of READMEs typically are the instructions to how to do things. So sometimes people aren't really friendly. We have a kind of a bad README here that just says, this is a thing, and it's in early development. OK, cool. It's in early development. That means I want to work on it. I want to be able to help you because there's lots of things I could do with this, right? There's not amazing features finished yet. Let me help. Well, there's no way to help, right? I see this, and sure, I can be in super hacker mode mentality and say, all right, I'm going to figure this out. I'm probably run setup.py, maybe, and then dig into the source code. But, or maybe I just say, OK, this is a thing. I don't know how to run it. I'm out of here. So that's kind of the worst case scenario. Or this is even worse, right? It says in the project description at the top, dead project, but there's no README. They could kind of do that better and say, hey, by the way, this is no longer maintained. Check out this repository instead. I've seen that on projects where someone will actually fork a project off and then become a maintainer of that project. And the original repo will just say, OK, cool, I don't want to delete this because a lot of people kind of go through this path of finding the other one. I want to let them know to go find that other one. And obviously on this one, this is an old project that I pulled up anyways. We see the commits, the most recent one being 4 years ago. So a little excusable, I suppose. But if you forget to do this, it's actually OK, because as a project maintainer, you can just one click and have a README within your project and just immediately go from there. Now that's going to open up a web editor within GitHub where you can make your file, write your markdown, or don't write your markdown. Just be friendly to people. Welcome them to your project. So you could also do this when you're creating a repository. We want to say create a README right away. There's the ignore, and that's license as well. These are things that we think are super important for when people jump into a project. I've seen people from certain backgrounds, maybe more Linux backgrounds and new developers who won't join a project because they don't see a license on it at all. They're like, whoa, 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 I don't even want to use this thing because what if? What if X happens and I'm suddenly liable for this? Well, make the license easy, which we've done there. So I'm obviously biased, but I think internally we do READMEs pretty dang well. It's like, here's what the project is, here's what it's about, here's how you install it, and that's it. And then here's some simple usage. So I'm a little biased, but that's obvious. As you scroll down further, there's more usage there. I don't have those on my slides. That's fine. And then even in our last, the keynote we were just in for, I believe this is, Spring Boot. This is an amazing README as well. I use Homebrew, and all I have to do here is type brew. I get this thing, and then just like he said, that's 140 characters. I could put that in a tweet. And suddenly, writing a Java project for me is a little bit easier, right? Maybe as I can level up, I can find this project, find examples that people have done with this, kind of like they did with through the Rails community. There was, this is a blog, this is a blog, this is a blog, and make it easy for people to kind of do those things and work out with one another, and you can start running these things. And it even says at the end, just jump on your command line, spring run app.groovy. That's cool. So what about the more complicated projects, right? We have these simple ones that just say, oh, grab it from Homebrew, write this little bit of a file, and then you're off and running. But what about when the project already exists? It's a little bit bigger. Maybe it's a Node app or some Java project. I don't write Java, so I can't come up with crazy examples. You need these quick steps that you probably want throughout all your projects within your organization. Because as I jump from project to project, I only want to remember a number of things, and I want that to be the same throughout all the projects. I jump in, I know I need dependencies, I know I need to kind of configure my database, and then I want to run the thing. So there's only kind of 2 or 3 things there. But how do you kind of share these standards we have a thing called culture tools. It's essentially a bunch of documentation around how to do this. So here's what our repo is about, blah, 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 our README. We have an ethos.md. It's kind of what are all of our internal tools about. I don't have a slide on talking about that, super secret. But we have a set of documentation, development documentation, about what our scripts are. Now, these are the scripts that you'll find in every single GitHub repository. And if you don't, I usually send them a pull request because I get contributions. Two of my favorite, though, are Bootstrap and Setup. So you'll notice on the right-hand side, Setup halfway down the screen actually calls script Bootstrap as a default for most of our projects. So Bootstrap is going to make sure the compiler is set, and it's going to download gems. Now, obviously, these are Ruby projects. They change for the Go projects and the Python projects that we have. But these are basic examples, right? So, OK, I run script Bootstrap to make sure I have all my gem dependencies. And then I need to reset my database, make sure my rack environment is set up right, and then basically echo back to the screen saying, cool, you're good to go, run this. But, I mean, what about the things that aren't in Ruby gems, right? Well, I need certain versions of Ruby. I need databases. I need to make sure those databases are the correct version for all people jumping to this project. And to do that, we created Boxen. So has anyone heard of Boxen? Cool. So Boxen is this, right? It's this Android thing that's amazing, right? But if you look at the subtext here at boxen.github.com, these words actually mean something. Fully configurable instant development environments for you and yours. You can even install Minecraft with it. So cool. All right. So I'm a little peaked here. I can install things that aren't just development. Well, how does this work? Once you have Boxen set up, I can say Boxen Rails, Boxen GitHub, and Boxen Training as downloading all of these internal apps that we have to get those on my machine. Now, that'll go out to Boxen, our specific installation of Boxen, look at some files, and say, OK, cool, here are the dependencies for that project. So I'm going to also have Boxen manifest files that say, or sorry, Puppet manifest files that say where to grab those dependencies, how to act on those files once I've downloaded them, and then continue down the line of this installation script of how to get that project running on my machine. So kind of what is Boxen? As I kind of alluded to, it's a set of Puppet scripts. So Puppet being a Ruby DSL for configuration management, we decided to make configuration management for your laptops. Now, everything that I'm about to show is OS X only, but Boxen's open source, so you guys should also contribute to the Windows or the Linux work on it as well, because they have package managers as well, and Puppet works on those machines, so there's really no limitation to actually doing this. We just have one guy internally who now kind of pseudo-maintains Boxen, and he's supposed to be ops full-time, so his life is hell. So there's really only 3 things you need to get your own version of Boxen running. Did you have a question? Oh, OK, cool. These 3 repositories are actually the 3 things you need to have Boxen running within your own organization. So github.com/Boxen, you can see these projects there. Our Boxen, Boxen Web, and Boxen itself kind of describe within each of those repositories what you actually need. Boxen Web is the interesting one because it's super lightweight. It's essentially just a screen, or it's a simple application. I believe it's a Sinatra app that just says, it has a given URL that you can set up, and the instructions actually give you a URL to set it up on Heroku to actually run it there. But then you send all your new hires to it, and you could say, OK, take this command, paste it into your terminal, and step away for like 5 minutes, go get some coffee, come back, and everything's done. Now, on day 1, what did they have to download? Maybe it's just defaults, your security updates that you want all of your employees to have. We have a custom message on our lock screen that say, if lost, please return to Brent Beer or call such and such. It does a full disk encryption, secure recycling bin deletion, stuff as just default. Now, past that, when you run that, it goes through all the Boxen install, but there's specific things in that you're going to want to configure yourself. So maybe I want to say that I want some custom things. So this is a little snapshot of part of my personal manifest. So at the top of my personal manifest, as kind of seems to trend within GitHubbers on our personal manifest, we specify things that aren't code. I need to make sure I have VLC, Fitbit, 1Password, Chrome, RDO, maybe you want Spotify if that's your thing, etc. All these applications that I actually want to run on my computer. If my computer were to die right now, I could get another one and immediately run Boxen and be good to go. I'd have all these projects as well. Furthermore, I can set up things like project teach, which is teach.github.com, projects like training Jekyll, or maybe I want the github.com code base. I could put that in there as well through that syntax. Now that special syntax at the top of project and then some project name, that's maintained by specific Boxen instructions. So we have a projects folder that is going to be looked at for all these project names. So the part after project is actually matched on a file name for you to download. And then inside that file, there's project files saying what you need. So Git configs as well. I want to make sure, like if I'm in class teaching Git, I might change my user and email to GitHub student and training plus GitHub students at github.com. And then I'll forget to change it back. And then all my commits on .com will end up being GitHub student, which is funny. It's like, that doesn't look like a Brent beer, but that's fine. And then I can set up my dot files. That was one thing as a Ruby programmer, or when dot files started becoming popular on GitHub, I had no idea how to do. I create files somewhere and then have to symlink them, but I want to share them with the community on GitHub. Like, look at all my cool vimrc files and Emacs and whatever. I don't know. I don't know how to do Bash very well. So basically copying and pasting from other GitHubbers their personal manifest, I was able to kind of figure out, OK, so Boxen's going to make sure that a directory exists, go make sure it's over there, link that to another directory, and then download a bunch of files into that directory, and then link them back to where they actually need to be. That's pretty cool. So and then the project manifest that I kind of alluded to can be super simple, and most of them are this simple. I need to make sure I have Phantom.js, Redis, Ruby specific version, MySQL, Elasticsearch, and .env as a project, just to say when you're using this, by default, make sure you can load environment variables. And then also Charlock Holmes, HTML pipeline to render certain things within the project itself, all kind of included and written right here. And see that GitHub project training, that's kind of that specific matching of that name as well. So when I run this, we have a default location that all projects are installed at. It's usually ~your company name / project name. That project name there is obviously what the folder gets called. So people also often ask me, why would you even bother with Boxen, right? Man, we just have some install scripts that work on everyone's computer. It's fine. But then Mavericks come out on on OS X, and then suddenly you don't know how to install anything, and everything is terrible. I take the word of my associates who do ops and installation and helping people install stuff all the time, different versions of Ruby, switching between environments, all stuff I actually never, ever want to deal with. Similarly, when I jump on these projects, I now know I can run Boxen, that project. I get all my dependencies. I jump into there. I have these scripts. And if I don't, Boxen will auto-file issues for me back to our Boxen repository so that our internal maintainer of our Boxen can say, oh, cool. Well, I see your entire stack trace, what version of your operating system you're running, and here's why things are breaking. So we have quite a few things to kind of help us with that. And also, if you want to know more about Boxen, you can read the README. It's actually quite amazing to read up on. Boxen.github.com, Boxen on IRC. There's quite a few people that are active in that community as well. So make it easy to get started, and many people will help. Boxen itself is easy for us to work on internally. So if I notice there's something wrong with someone else's personal manifest, I can go work on that, because using Boxen, downloading it, and working on the project itself is even easy, made by itself. So kind of ending notes here, right? what do we do now? You just laid 3 things in front of me that I can really do nothing with. You don't have to do all 3 of these things at once, but start small, kind of ship often to kind of get these things going. I think the first one that's easiest to do is to talk as much as possible, right? So make sure you have chat running within your company. If, there'll probably be a lot of people saying, why do we need that? I don't need that right now. Whether it's Microsoft Live or Yahoo Messenger, whatever it happens to be, I think just talking to people more often kind of makes everyone better friends, and then there's better trustability that happens between teams and even in management structure as well. And within that communication, if you decide to take a look around, people can ask you what you're doing or why it is you're exploring these new projects, but that's okay because you're able to talk to them. There's more channels of communication that are open with that. And also with the pull request and the issues and all the stuff that you actually use within GitHub, you're able to do better communication there. And then lastly, once you do find those things, make sure they're easy for everyone to work on. Make it easy for you to work on. If you try something and it fails for you, don't just decide to fix it and not tell anyone about it. If you see something, say something, fix something. Thanks.